Now proceed to the next item, which is item 9, and we'll hear from Kataraina Maki, our General Manager of Community and Social Policy, and this is on Council's position and role in affordable housing. And not forgetting Peter Chowdhury, who did the hard yards writing the report. Peter, I think, Peter, are you going to present? Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. The report follows the 27th of November meeting of the Planning Committee, where the committee considered the report Affordable Housing a snapshot. The committee requested staff to use the report as a basis for engagement with key stakeholders and to develop options for Council's position and role in relation to affordable housing. So the committee has already heard this morning from the Auckland Community Housing Providers Network, with whom we engaged, and the Property Council have also supplied a late note as a supplement to the engagement that we had with them. And I believe that late note's being circulated now to the committee. We also had engagement with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and advisory staff from IMSB, from the Māori Housing Organisation Te Matapihi, and other stakeholders. So the scope of the paper is on affordable housing initiatives that are open to council within the wider existing housing system, and focuses particularly on the intermediate housing market. So that's in relation to people who are currently renting, are paying in excess of 30% of their income on housing costs, and are ineligible for any kind of social housing support. So the focus of the paper is very much on those people. The paper presents 3 options. There's a status quo option to continue partnering and influencing on a case-by-case basis within the existing policy and plan settings. A do more option, where in addition to our existing activities, we investigate additional levers and possible plan changes and strengthen partnerships for collaboration. And a lot more option, where council investigates also becoming a social and or affordable housing provider. So the recommended option in the paper is the do more option, which is option 3. This option provides council with the flexibility to respond to the rapidly changing context we're currently facing. It commits council only to investigate the feasibility and indicative costs of new initiatives, and it would have an increased impact should those initiatives go ahead over what is currently being done in a more cost-efficient way than under option 4. Thank you.
I'll happy to take questions for the officers, members. Member Hanare, please.
First up. I'm a fan of option 4 because it's a bull at a gate, and I think that's what we need to do is to run out there on the streets and pick up the hammer and pick up some timber and go and build. So I'm an option 4 person. However, can I ask you this? And again, it may not be to the right person, so I'd take some guidance from the chair. What would a B to the recommendation? What would this sound like? That the Auckland Council endorse and include in the successful option the IMSB's climate action plan. What would that do? I'm not sure whether I'm asking the right person. I'm sorry, Chair.
I might send that one Kataraina's way and ask her to respond to you, member.
And can I just clarify, do you mean that to the existing resolution in the paper?
Yeah, just as a B. So at the moment, I support 3 and 4. That's cool. I'm a 4. But what would the inclusion of a B do to that? Where you want to go with that recommendation? I say it because I think that we need some statement that here's a plan. We've all seen it. IMSB spent thousands of dollars on it in consultation with a whole lot of other people. You guys have seen it. You're supposedly working it into the work stream somewhere, and all I'm saying is, okay, let's endorse it and let's include it officially as an option.
So that would work with option 3 if we put a 7. So, and just specifically reference the Te Kāinga Action Plan. We've already, if you look at paragraph 46.
46, yeah.
We've already indicated that if the committee chooses option 3 or 4, that means we can directly look at the initiatives that suit whatever option is chosen and start to investigate them like the rest of the items we've identified in option 3.
Yeah, but I think this takes it just a little weeny bit forward than just recognising and
yes. So the caveat would be, there are some things in the Te Kāinga Action Plan that are probably sit more comfortably within the option 4.
Yeah, cool.
If we put it as a 7, we wouldn't be looking at those. We would just be looking at the specific actions in the Te Kāinga Strategic Action Plan that fit with the option 3 that's approved.
So now comes
a B would mean that we would look at the options in the Te Kāinga Action Plan, whether they were option 3 or 4, wouldn't matter, and we would come back to this committee on our recommendations on implementation and the cost based on that. So there's just the 2 slightly different ways of doing it.
Yeah. The second question, which should have been the first, is there an ability to put option 3 and 4 together, rather than having them separate and having to choose between them? Because I see the leadership part of option 3 also being part of option 4, because it's taking action.
Yeah.
I know there's some other politics and policy around what's in option 4 and option 3, but I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to combine most of 3 and most of 4.
Through the chair, I think there's like 2 answers to that. If you have a look on page 38, you'll see that the options that we've proposed actually build on the last option. So the answer kind of is no, because option 4 includes option 3. It includes what we're doing now, doing more, and doing even more. If you're asking, could we have a mix of option 3 and 4 as it relates to the Te Kāinga Strategic Action Plan only, and just looking at that combination for what that specific action plan says, then I think that could be accommodated. It's very specific, it's very contained to the Te Kāinga Strategic Action Plan, and it does meet one of the biggest cohorts affected by affordable housing and social housing, which is, Māori. So I suppose there's a way we could do that, 3 and 4, just for investigating the Te Kāinga Strategic Action Plan.
Councillor Hulse. Now, Councillor Hulse, will you move this? Move. Councillor Casey, would you like to second? Oh, got a question? Look, I'll second it then, and then it's a live motion. Councillor Hulse, did you want to ask a question at this point?
I don't have a question, but I'll speak.
Okay, I'll come back to you then, Councillor Hulse. Question, Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. Good. I enjoyed reading the report. I'm sitting more towards option 4 as well, because I like to think that we're going to be building Auckland's future. All right. Now with that one, point 7. I just thought I'd try and tie in a gentleman who launched on the weekend. in point 7, it talks about estimates and uncertainty, so some costs, unsure of costs and some uncertainty. Could you elaborate on what you believe those cost estimates might be? I'm not sure if you've considered what those costs are, because you're saying that option 4 might be the more expensive way to go, and what you believe fits into that definition of uncertainty.
Through the chair, just to clarify, so the position and roles signal an intent and a container in terms of what staff are to go off and look at. So in the option 4, that container is much more direct, and we would go off to look at what would it cost to directly intervene and provide housing, services and products, like what are the options for building, but what are the options for subsidising instead of building? So you might subsidise existing community housing providers or Māori housing providers. You might look at what, in a very broad sense, what council land is available to put into that kind of pot. So you would be looking at capital development. You'd look at a range of those products. A range of those products would have costs. This only commits you to us going away and looking at those costs, saying what outcomes you might achieve for the costs, and then you would make specific decisions. But it does hint at a willingness to contemplate those if the costs and impacts, work out. So if we come back with a business case with a very positive cost-benefit analysis, choosing option 4 indicates you would be open to those. Whereas option 3 indicates that staff don't go off and have a look and do the work and develop those things. We bring back a more limited suite of choices to you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And that raises the point, really, because remember Henry talks about what if there was a crossover between 3 and 4, and I'm looking at 4, and I'm just a little bit concerned. I need to just clarify this, because there are points in the role of option 4, which I assumed we were doing anyway. We are making land available for affordable housing. Panuku is doing that. It's a requirement through their strategic outcomes on development. And then the second bullet point slightly is a reflection of this very similarly worded bullet point under option 3. So I just didn't want to have a situation, Karawaina, that further down the track you bring back work and somebody might say, well, no, that was option 4. We didn't go with that. We went up with option 3. So we can just clarify or just reconcile those parts, please.
So I suppose if you have a look at the differences, it's a matter of graduation as well. So yes, Panuku is doing some developments. Council has broader land than just that can also be looked at. There are different gradations in terms of what you might ask Panuku to do. For example, under option 4, you might get into developments which are purely large percentages of social and affordable housing and market housing that are more than they're currently doing, or in more areas than they are currently doing. So this is a scale of, if we're doing it now, option 3 and 4 is we would do it some more. We would do more of it. We would invest more in it. I think I suppose we've tried to make the subtle difference between options 3 and 4 between incentives and subsidies and capital investment. So if that's not clear, then we could clarify that. 3 is about looking at some of those incentives. For example, the Wellington City Council example, where they are a master tenant, we would look at that under option 3. In option 4, we'd be looking at, direct provision and what subsidies we might provide to individuals or housing providers, particularly in that rental market, for people who can't get the accommodation supplement because they don't qualify. So it's a little bit subtle, I suppose, incentives or subsidies in a bigger sense for direct provision.
Thanks for clarifying that. Councillor Casey, please.
Like Councillor Collins and Councillor Henare, I am a option 4 councillor. I think we need to step up. And so my question relates, though, I'm also a pragmatist, and when you start talking about subsidies and greater cost, I can see people's lights switching off and them voting for option 3. So the pragmatist in me wants the hybrid that Councillor Henare asked for, and what? Took me 2 turns, so he's quick. The hybrid for me would be to make sure that there's an additional bullet point in 3. So my question is, what would happen if we add this in? So it's a number 7, and it's to increase the stock of housing for older people, increasing the council stock of housing for older people. At the moment, we have 1,412 units, and in all our documentation for Haumaru Housing and Panuku and our Auckland plan, we say we will at least maintain, and I remember the bloodbaths with Jacques over those words. What we actually mean is we want to increase it. We just don't actually say the words. So that's the words I'd like to see up there. That would be my hybrid. What would be the result of that in terms of option 3?
So I think in terms of both member Henare's suggestion, which is quite a focus on Māori housing, which is a combination of 3 and 4, and yours, which has a focus on our building off our existing stock and older people's housing, it would mean that we would go and do specific work to look at what would be the ways, the methods and the costs of increasing that, and perhaps different levels, depending on your resolution, different levels of increasing that provision. And so mostly that is about just going, how would we do it? What would it cost? And bringing that back. In option 3 currently, without the amendment, I don't see us doing that.
Right. Thanks very much, Katarina. So that's just given notice, Mr. Chairman, of that amendment, which would be an amendment to add another bullet point, number 7, to option 3 at some stage in this debate.
So that's likely the second amendment I've got. So if we can just hold that, and can you hold it for your speaking turn, and maybe just convey it to Chief of Strategy? You've done that? Good. Councillor Sayers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Three questions, really. First one's around infrastructure funding. If you've got any comment about, across all those options, I guess mainly option 3 and 4, are there any game changes? I just can't pick it out of the paper. Are we touching on that at all in terms of funding, alternative funding mechanism for infrastructure?
Through the Chair, no, it hasn't been contemplated in the options as they're currently developed.
Thank you. Second question is, in terms of option 3 and 4, would either of those result in section prices or bare land prices becoming any more affordable?
So through the chair, at this stage, what we're looking to do is develop with REMU some modelling around the cost of land prices and the likely impact on affordability. So that would be part of the investigation.
For both options?
For option 3, which also means it would be included in option 4 if that was adopted.
Okay, thank you. And final question, just trying to flesh out a little bit more some of the questioning around option 4 there. We're talking about subsidies and incentives, but you also mentioned capital investment. And that's probably where my question's directed, in terms of suddenly trying to invest in increasing council's owned stock there. The capital investment in there I imagine would be significant. I'd be correct in that one in terms of the amount of investment out of CapEx.
So through the Chair, the reports we'd bring back, of course, would give you a range of investment, but it does envisage we would come back with papers looking at that type of investment. It won't just be, we don't bring you anything that's just like, here's a huge amount. There'll be graduated capital investment approaches or alternative ways of doing that, like subsidies. There is a lot of additional support and staff work if we directly provide housing. It's not just the provision, it's the running of it or contracting someone to run of it. Whereas other methods, which might be more subsidy type methods, you know, the benefits are they don't necessarily come with those types of costs. So we would be bringing you a full range of options within that direct provision.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Councillor Filipono.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to ask a further question based on Councillor Collins and option 4. There was a second part to his particular question, which was uncertainty about implementation. So where is the uncertainty around the implementation? That's the first question I have.
So the uncertainty is, in a way, making a decision on a broad option package when in fact you don't have the specifics in front of you. So the uncertainty is we have to then go away and bring back a specific package which you could decide on that would alleviate that uncertainty. But, you know, anything that costs money in a constrained financial environment, you know, there is going to be that level of uncertainty all the time, particularly around what we pay and what the outcome and impact of any investment decision would be. And that kind of output to outcome tension always leaves a level of uncertainty.
Chair, next question is, Kataraina, with the discuss or the questions that have been asked now or already before me, if the options around Kainga's strategic action plan, if the housing for the elderly, or older persons, if they were put into option 4, obviously, well, I mean, yes, they're looking at option 3, but I'm looking at option 4 around more investigation work. Because at the moment, can you confirm or not that the housing for the elderly, and the strategic action plan is not in option 4?
So, through the chair, yes, they would be in option 4. However, specifying them would bring specific attention to them as priority cohorts within the wider option. So if they are specified in either option 3 or option 4, that signals prioritisation to staff, and it means we focus in quite firmly. So I mean, that's the bonus of having it specific.
And my last question, Chair, is that if option 4, which includes what we have in option 3, plus more investigative work, we won't be doing that in option 3, will we? The more investigative work. So that's one question. And the supplementary to that is that if option 4 is successful, because I know there's an amendment coming through around option 4, if that is successful, we would not have made a decision to completely go the way that Wellington City Council have, Dunedin, as pointed out in the public arena, is that things will come back to the planning committee with the information around the money, around implementation, for us to make a decision?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
At the moment, you can't commit two initiatives when
Yep.
we have not
Yeah.
provided you with the details. But the options do indicate a clear intent of how far you are willing for staff to go in terms of what they bring back to you, and your intent in your mind in terms of how far this committee might go. So I suppose a clear indication of option 3, it's what we won't do. That's clear. So we won't be looking at direct provision if you choose option 3. It's more of that way. It's kind of the things we won't be doing if you choose option 3. And if you choose option 4, of course, the food basket is very broad, and it shows, you're willing to look very broadly at the role of council in this.
Question to you, just with the process around the amendments that have been put forward, will we be going through those after the questions? I know that Councillor Bartley has got questions, but is that the process after the questions are that we go straight through to Councillor Collins and then, depending on that, go to Councillor Casey?
Thank you. So I've got questions to be asked by Councillor Bartley and then the Mayor, and then the amendments. I think I've just checked with the mover, and the mover, Councillor Hulse, is very willing to accommodate the amendments because they're actually directions that are to investigate further. They're not conclusive, so they don't have an impact on budgets immediately or anything like that. But we'll get there in a minute. How about we take the two questions, Councillor Bartley first, then Mayor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report. My question is it wise for us to support an option where the impact on the outcome is unknown?
Many of the outcomes are often unknown. So just take the inclusionary retained affordability zoning as an example. The point of the work, for example, on that will be to try and model what both the costs are of doing something like that, and then model what the impact might be. But even when we do models, they are still based on assumptions, and there is, sometimes that specific outcome is uncertain, but the whole purpose of investigation is to provide increasing certainty based on modelling.
Thank you. I'm just signalling my support as well for option 4 because I see more statements about direct impact on income through option 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Mayor Goff, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We heard from the community housing providers this morning about support given by Christchurch, Wellington and Queenstown through a variety of mechanisms, sometimes loans to housing trusts and sometimes grants to not-for-profit organisations. Are you able to quantify for us what the actual financial level of support of those three councils are to CHPs?
Through the Chair, no, we can't quantify that. We haven't been given any costings, but we can talk directly with the councils to find out.
Thank you, that'd be really useful. I just didn't know whether they were investing hundreds of thousands, millions or tens of millions. It wasn't clear from the presentation.
Just to clarify through the Chair, of course some of those initiatives and grants that they are doing, this council has already approved and is doing as well. For example, we've got grants that go to iwi and Māori groups in terms of papakainga and Māori housing provision. You've got grants going to like Auckland Mission. So it's not as if you haven't got mixtures of these things going on already as well.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Now, just before we go to the Movers Corp, Councillor Hulse to speak, and then Councillor Casey. So, received two possible amendments that I think we could incorporate, but I want to just test that. If we could get those up. So these are from Councillor Casey, and I think you've heard her questions and inquiry there, and also Member Henare's inquiry. So can I, just in terms of sort of a willingness of members, is there a view that we can just very easily incorporate those rather than go through a whole moving and seconding amendments? And it is to investigate both, and so it doesn't jump to any conclusion. Just any other view other than accepting those? There being none, can I just check with the mover and the seconder? Are you happy to just incorporate?
You're the seconder.
I'm the sorry, the movers of the amendments as they are, and the seconders. And Councillor Hulse, you've already signalled that I'm happy.
Yeah.
Therefore, we shall incorporate. We'll just lift those up. There we go. We've saved about 15 minutes. Now, speaking to this, incorporated, so we've got a 7 and an 8. I'll hand to Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think just listening to the conversation, it sounds like we're all in agreement that by adding these in, we can investigate them and then quite logically bring back a sensible discussion about, you know, how we fund and what we can do. The worry that I had with sending out a sense out into our community that we were actually going to move to provision is that that is a huge precedent for us to set, and it's not something that local government has done. We're one of the few councils that's remained in the provision of older adult housing, and I chair that on and am proud that much of that came from the West. But to really stretch our boundaries out into the direct provisioning of housing when we don't have a large bottom line to play with, I think is somewhat disingenuous. And I know we've got a lot of people saying, you know, we're going to hold rates, we're not going to put rates up, and we're going to solve homelessness in 18 months. Well, you know, good luck with that. What this is doing is actually genuinely putting out clearly what we can do, but just as equally and honestly, which is unusual in politics, what we can't do. So I think we're heading in a very good direction, and Mr. Chair, I hope this is unanimously supported.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. I need to just check on something here though, because the first read and request staff investigate levers. So the motions were to investigate Kāinga, strategic action plan, and investigate increasing current stock of housing for the older people. But as it read originally, we were agreeing 1 to 6. We were not agreeing further investigation of that. We were agreeing, and there's quite a big difference between the two. Kataraina, can you just have a look at that? Because I think the members were, in the speaking turns that were taken, there was definitely agreement on the first 6, and then the investigations were on the next 2.
I, as the mover, I would rather we agree the first 6 and then we, investigate increasing the current stock of older adult housing, which is kind of already in train, and investigate. Even though in item 3, sorry, can I just check, Mr. Chair, and sorry to speak twice, my understanding was that for our Kāinga strategic action plan, the implementation of those actions are going to be explored as part of option 3 anyway, so we're kind of doing it. But are we just wanting to make it overt? We can say investigate, number 7, whatever it is, could be to, investigate options for the implementation of the Kāinga.
Look, I agree with you. I think there's a big difference, and sorry, but I think we need to just adjust those words at the top and maybe take them out and signal that it's an investigation of the 7 and the 8, because otherwise it looks like we're re-investigating what we've already investigated, and that's the last thing we want to be criticised for here at council. So can we just by agreement tidy this up and show that there's an investigation of the 7 and the 8? We'll just do that now.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
We'll just do that. So assuming that that is the motion, Councillor Filipaina, would you like?
Chair, I was just going to suggest, and look, I may be wrong here, we'll just put in B. and request staff to investigate the following levers, which is Kāinga Strategic Action Plan and increasing stock. I think, yeah. Okay, sorry, I just thought there was going to be all.
Anybody else like to speak to the motion? We're just refining it right now. Councillor.
I just had a question, sorry. I thought that this was going to look at both 3 and 4, but it only says option 3 up there. Because if that's the case, then I'll move an amendment for option 4.
No, we have the motion before us, and as moved by Councillor Hulse is option 3. And some of the questions that were answered by both Peter and Kataraina explained that sort of graduated difference between some of the things that are mentioned in option 3 and in option 4, but it wasn't suggested that we're going to be adopting option 4 in full here today. Councillor Hulse, that I'm just checking with you, that wasn't how you spoke. It was option 3 with further investigations of the Kāinga Strategic Action Plan and also investigating increasing the housing stock for older people. Clarification?
If Councillor Bartley's going to put that up, then I'd like to second her motion. But you know, you decide where it all goes. I don't know where it all goes.
Okay, look, what I'm going to do here is Councillor Hulse's already spoken, and so it's been moved and seconded. It's live. So if you want to put up another motion, then I'll take it that you're beginning your speaking turn and would like to do so, but I really don't have any words in front of me here at the moment. So are there other speakers? And I'll keep your speaking turn open, Councillor Bartley, in case you want to use it. Councillor Collins?
I had a question for clarification, Sue, so I don't know if I should just not ask it.
I'm happy to receive that.
The question I had for clarification was, does the request for option 4 to be considered, is there enough in the amended current accepted motion on the table to fit the expanded investigation that option 4 would have given us? I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just wondering, are these now one and the same with the amendments, or is option 4 still very different? Because when Kataraina answered the question, she said option 4 offered a few other things that they could go and investigate. So I'm just trying to get clear on how specific or wide either option is, and actually are they the same, Chair? Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm hearing that Councillor Casey's points are addressed through the motion as you see now, Councillor Casey?
Please be so bold. We already have in our Auckland plan and in Panuku's documentation and Haumaru housing the wish to increase our housing stock. So it's not there's no reason why it can't be a number 6. So it's not about investigating. It's actually what we say we're going to do.
Look, I don't have that before us. No one's given us that documentation. So look,
Documentation.
The words from the...
We've spent hours
no.
on the words.
Look,
hours.
The blood pressure does not need to increase.
We will at least maintain our current stock of housing for older people. Remember? Must have been an hour and a half. Where's Jacques? Is he still standing?
I asked a really simple question, and earlier you said that motion satisfied you, and I'm just rechecking.
Yeah, because it was then 6 and 7, and now it's gone down to some investigation planet.
Which is what you wrote in your amendment.
I didn't. No, I didn't. It was simply number 7, increase our stock of affordable housing, council stock of affordable housing for older people. You don't have to check it. I know what I wrote.
Okay. Well, what I had before me was slightly different. Henare, are you happy for the words to investigate the Kāinga Action Plan?
I mean, I would have said endorsed, because that's where I am. And I know that in In 46, it says that, we're going to investigate, but I'm actually further down the track than investigating.
So you'll live with that, the words as it is?
Yeah, if I can't get endorsed, I'll have to.
We haven't... just a minute. Look, if we support those two, we'll see the further work done. And that's, I think, the most important thing. I will go to... Member Leanne Namani.
Oh, kia ora, this isn't necessarily in the conversation, but I wanted to speak to it, whether it's option 3 or 4. We want to ensure that the Kāinga Action Plan is at the centre of it, and also that the Independent Māori Stat Board and the advice that we provide around affordable housing for Māori is heard. And I just need to say that while I accept this is at a higher level about the position and role of council, we want assurances that whoever's developing policy, whoever's developing matters within that, and I'll be quite specific, Pānuku, that they give us some respect and engage with us. We have identified that we were keenly interested in the housing mix policy as an example, and their engagement with us has been poor. So we want some assurances as we move through this that our advice is being taken seriously by this council, and whatever can be done to ensure that would be very helpful.
So look, are there other speakers on the motions? Mayor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak in favour of option 3 as amended, because I think we should look at how capable we are of increasing the current stock of housing through Haumaru. I'm in favour of the objective, but we need to try to work out, quantify what actually might be affordable there. I'm also in favour of investigating the Kāinga Strategic Action Plan. I'm in favour of investigate because I don't know yet what the financial implications are, and I never sign up to anything when I don't know what the cost will be. I learned a bit of politics under the guidance of the Right Honourable Helen Clark. She always said that it's better to under-promise and over-deliver than do it the other way around. And I know for a fact that if we support option 4, as desirable as that might be for all of us, that has big, big dollar signs attached to it. To build 200 homes is going to cost you at least 100 million, probably 120 million. And we have not budgeted for that in our long-term plan or our annual plan. We've got things coming from left and right field on Eden Park wants this and Western Springs wants that, and, City Rail Link, and we know that there are increasing construction costs. We have to be absolutely responsible as we sit around this table. This is not a feel-good discussion. This is what can we afford, what have we budgeted for? There's not a person here that wouldn't like to see us putting a whole lot more money into affordable housing. But until, I think option 3 gives us a good start to that. I'd like to see a whole lot more developments like Barraclough. I think Barraclough's great. Let's do some more of that. I do want to, regardless of what the Property Council says in the submission, I do want to have inclusionary zoning, because inclusionary zoning is about building communities. It's not just about costs. It's about saying we're not going to have the wealthy there and the poor there and never the twain shall meet. Let's try and get communities where we can get a cross-section of people. There's a whole lot we can do under option 3. But if we go out and create the expectation that suddenly we can click our fingers like that and we've got hundreds of millions of dollars to build a couple of hundred million homes, a couple of hundred homes, we are creating expectations we will simply not deliver on. Let's be honest with people. Let's say, yes, we're committed to those things. You know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and there's quite a few steps there that I think are worthwhile, but don't create the impression that we can become another Housing New Zealand because we simply don't have the capital investment to put in it. We are being dishonest to pretend otherwise.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Other speakers? Councillor Casey, please.
I wasn't going to speak, but I can't have Eden Park and housing for older people in the same sentence. For years, in fact, every single time the seniors panel has come to this council, it's asked us to increase the stock of housing for older people in Auckland. We can do that. So I'm speaking in support of option 3, and I'm speaking in support of increasing current stock, but I'm sorry you prompted this. I wasn't going to.
We're both on the same track. We're both agreeing with what's up.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, okay, right. Well, no, I'll have that. I'll stop. That's.
We understand your passion here, Councillor. Look, briefly in support of this entirely, and thanks for your work, Kataraina. Look, I understand paragraph 9 is because of the election process that we're not too far off. So members, I guess probably my small quibble there would be the word start investigating affordable housing levers. We know that the team have been working on that for some time since we first raised our determination to refocus on affordability, and I think it was early last year, and the work is being undertaken there. In terms of option 4, I guess there are some things in option 4 which are worthy of consideration, and Kataraina's referred to this sort of this graduation of between how option 3 is worded in part and option 4. I think where there's capital intensive requirements with rent to buy schemes and possibly shared equity, yes. Subsidies and further incentives, yes, I do have some questions, and I really want to understand what the financial implications were to be there before I'd embark on option 4. But in terms of the support for co-housing is taking off in big cities. It's a very big solution now in Sydney, and there are community housing providers and private companies working in that space. So when I see co-housing in option 4, I wouldn't like it to be seen that we're not supportive of co-housing. I read it as we're just not providing capital for co-housing. So overall, I think we're well on the track here, members, and we'll definitely invest in the Kāinga plan and increasing the housing stock for older people. Thank you. Councillor Hulse, do you have anything further to say? Put that to the... Councillor Sayers now. Councillor Sayers?
Thank you. I thought I was going to miss out the Chair. Thanks very much. Look, Auckland's a beautiful and vibrant city, and it's got many, many desirable qualities. But look, its housing costs are out of control, especially for our first home buyers, for our renters, for the people on fixed incomes, and for our most vulnerable communities in Auckland. For example, Auckland is the 9th most unaffordable city in the world. And I don't know how we can sit around this table and not look at far more bolder, radical actions than what we've just been talking about around this paper. I believe dealing with the housing affordability crisis is actually a moral issue. The most significant moral issue that Auckland Council is facing at this present time. The ugly social outcomes for the wealth gaps that have been created between the haves and don't haves, the poverty, the homelessness, the disease, third world diseases that are appearing throughout our city at a rapid rate, just don't seem to be being treated with the urgency it deserves. I think it's highly morally wrong too that our young people have given up virtually any hope of home ownership. So, you know, my main comments around this paper would be the regulatory costs, it alludes to them, yet in our annual plan, our building consent costs and our resource consent costs are being proposed to go up. That's not intervening, that's not leadership, which is the subtitle of option 2. We need to be driving those costs down, not up, and speeding up the time around our processing. We need to be fast tracking instead of going to cost plus mentalities, which is all I've seen in the latest papers presented by Auckland Council to myself and the public. I'll just repeat what I spoke about in the last item, Mr. Chair, about the price of bare land. If there's no changes to land prices, affordable housing cannot be a reality. No developer, whether big player or small player, can build affordable housing for Aucklanders with the current land prices. So something significant needs to happen. You know, I thought we were in a housing crisis. This needs to be dealt with a lot more urgency, like a state of emergency, compared to more planning and writing of papers and the discussions that we've had today. I can't see how this is going to result in affordable housing. So my point is, I find this paper very weak. I also don't agree with the inclusion of council providing more stock itself. I can't agree with that. That is possible to achieve through the private sector investments. Certainly there should be partnerships out there, but council doing it on their own, I don't agree with. So, you know, in terms of B1, yes, B2, no. Therefore, I won't be supporting option 2.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Now I've got Councillor Collins and Councillor Bartley. Councillor Collins.
Oh, thanks, Sue. I'm going to reluctantly support it. Well, I'll support it, but my reluctance is around what I thought option 4 was, which was being a bit more daring and showing and being creative in the way we go out and investigate. And I don't believe that we would be sending messages such that we're going to get out there and provide it ourselves, to the extent that the leadership is about investigating and getting those reports back, which is what I believe the answers from the officers were. It was talk about, you know, what the cost of the provision of 100 homes. Well, everyone knew I was the only one at the time that voted against the America's Cup, and we've spent well over 100 million committed to the America's Cup. We've sold off so many state houses that our people are lining up with nowhere to go. And sure, that's a government issue. So what does that mean? That means that people like myself and Councillor Filipaina, who was starting to show us his leaning to option 4 as well, and Councillor Bartley, know that it's our people who are being locked out of even state houses. We heard this morning, and the comment from the affordable house, or the community housing group, was affordable means affordable. And I love this theorem that we've come up with. This, you know, we've worked it out to 30% of a person's income. If you are not in a state house, you are going to struggle. And that is what I believe. When I hosted Councillor Sayers out in South Auckland the other time, and we went around and we had a good look at some of those boarding housing situations, the fact of the matter is, I believe we are in office to provide the leadership for those communities who want those messages, who want us to be bold, who want us to say, let's go out and find it. And yet, I'm challenged by Dr. Casey even saying today that she's got the pragmatist in her at work. I want to build a brighter future like the last government said they would for us. Oh. Eh? Maybe that's what we need to return to, eh? Where was that brighter future after they sold off a few of those state houses? Look, the point I think that option 4 provided is the boldness to go out and encourage our staff to come back and tell us, what is it going to cost? And we understand that there's going to be major costs involved. It's important that we know so that we can go back to our communities and say to them, here's the challenges that we face. So I wanted to support option 4. I'm happy to go with option 3, but I think we really need to look very closely at how we are leading for this city and for the most vulnerable, many of whom are in Manuko. Thanks.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to figure out whether I have any support for option 4, but I don't think I do. And so I was going to speak in favour of option 3. That's up there. But I keep thinking of that definition, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I really hope that this option 3 is doing something different. I hope it's not doing the same as we would always do, because I've seen what's happened in Tamaki. You guys have all heard about what's happened in Tamaki. If option 4 was in place, there would have been some options there for people to be able to stay in the community through the rent to buys, the shared equity, the co-housing. 211 families moved out of Tamaki, and that's because they couldn't afford to stay there. Some moved out of choice, but some were reassessed out of state housing because they're working. There's no private rental for them to go into, so they moved over to Waimahia and got houses over there. So I really do think we need to do more, and I saw option 4 as the option to take leadership and be direct about us leading this change. You know, I listened to you, Mr. Mayor, on the project last night. You were talking about housing affordability. So I thought this was a way that we could achieve that. But I don't, you know, I've been here a year now. I'm pretty sure I won't have support for option 4. So I'll just go ahead with option 3. But also want to emphasise my support for the Kāinga Strategic Action Plan, because Māori and Pasifika home ownership rates are low. They continue to get lower. And the Auckland Plan talks about inequity, housing availability and costs are major contributing factors to the rise of inequity in Auckland. Well, you know, we really do need to do more to address that inequity. And I'm thinking of the family that I'm trying to get out of a car over in Northcote. You know, they just want a private rental. They don't want a stay house. They want a private rental, but they can't afford one. So, you know, we get these everyday people needing housing, and I thought we needed to do something a little bit more out there. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to support option 4 if there was one that was going to be put up there. And the reason I was going to support it was because options were going to be investigated. And that was it. This is why I asked the questions that I did, based on what Councillor Collins had asked earlier, was just to get it investigated, and then we could come back. If it came back with the dollars that are required, well then so be it. We would then make a decision based on the further information. Chair, my request of our staff is that in your kōrero, Chair, you mentioned some of the options that are part of option 4. I'm hoping that they get investigated. I'm hoping that what Dunedin are doing, what Wellington are doing, and I know what Kataraina had said, that we are currently doing some of that anyway. But, you know, the options you mentioned in your kōrero, hopefully we could still do the investigation. Just because it's not up there, that doesn't mean that we can do something, because as both, well, not both, but everybody said around here, that it is a crisis. And we want to be and play a big part in solving, hopefully, this issue that won't get any further that affects our community. So I was going to sort of ask of a point of order because of Councillor Bartley with her amendment, but I didn't, because I just thought everybody was heading towards 3. So as a result, Chair, I will be supporting the recommendation as outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hulse, you've heard a bit more since I invited you. Would you like to take the right to reply?
Close the debate. Thank you. This has been an exceedingly long meeting, and we seem to have forgotten item 8, that where we are in meetings with, on a formal basis, the key ministers involved in this. And I think we need to complete the circle, which is all of the issues that are being raised here that's the venue, that's the place, that's the arena for those discussions. Because I guess, Mr. Chair, I've heard some impassioned speeches, and, you know, of course we're passionate about this. I, as a mother and a grandparent, my oldest son and his partner and their 3 kids are looking for a house in Glen Eden. They're looking at an $800,000 mortgage. That makes me want to weep. And they're lucky that they can even be in the ballpark of thinking about that. Housing is the most important thing. And with the greatest of respect to some of the impassioned speeches are easy, action's hard. You know, the unitary plan went some of the way. Not a lot of support around the table for some of the hard decisions with that. We finally got there. Investment in social infrastructure. Not a lot of support around the table when it comes to putting rates up. And as we embark on the hustings, not a lot of discussion about putting the actual money that's required to make a difference to our people that we all speak so eloquently about. I'm not standing. I'm looking forward to seeing the councillors around this table who put their money where their mouth is and talk about the kind of rates rises that are needed to deliver what you're talking about. You know, let's have a little bit of honesty there. Finally, Mr. Chair, next year's the LTP. If we are going to make some big shifts in investment and some big shifts in policy and some big shifts in making an appreciable difference to the social outcomes of our community, that LTP year is critical. So this is the time for looking, investigating, thinking. No apologies for that. There's been a cataclysmic failure of successive governments to grasp the nettle on this one. We're not going to rush and do things now in a few weeks. So taking the time to do it properly, I think, is absolutely right. And this conversation will certainly be taken by the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, yourself and myself to those meetings with ministers. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Good challenge to those that follow. Thank you. I will put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Now, are there contrary voices that want to be recorded on Councillor Sayers? Is it on everything, Councillor Sayers? So, and Councillor Stewart, on everything? I just need to know what it's on and what it's not on. Everything? Everything for Councillor Sayers and Councillor Stewart. I've got everybody covered. Thank you. So I declare that carried, and we will now adjourn until quarter past 2. Quarter past 2? Thank you.